Nick Hayes of Hayes Review. He does fantastic analysis of globalism over there. Welcome to Geopolitics and Empire, Nick.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I first found you on Telegram. I use many platforms to seek information, Telegram, X, email lists, websites. I'm always looking at footnotes, other podcasts that I listen to. I go through the people that they're talking to. And so you're doing, I very much enjoy the work that you're doing. And if you want to just tell us briefly, who is Nick and what is Hayes Review?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm from the UK, and I started doing this around a year ago. What happened was that I was experimenting with book reviews. I started making book reviews on YouTube, and then somebody told me about a program called OBS. And then in that program, there's a little button that says go live. And I thought, I wonder what happens if I click that. And then I started doing live streams. And now I do live streams of book readings. And I just read through the book from start to finish. And I try and pick books that are interesting and relevant. But I really focus on books that I'm surprised exist and I never heard of before. So to me, it's a learning journey. And it's really something that I do because I'm interested and I'm motivated to learn. And I think, well, if I want to know what's between the pages of these books, then I'm sure other people do as well. And so that's what I do now. I've got a live stream that goes out twice a week on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. And it's a lot of fun. And I'm really getting to grips with a lot of aspects of history that are occulted or left out of the mainstream education systems and curriculums, and I'm getting a sort of self-education on globalism and technocracy and a lot of the agendas which we've been sort of born into, but have actually been afoot for a very, very long time. And so my kind of waking up moment, I don't like that term, but the moment I started paying attention was when we all got locked down and the messaging about why didn't make any sense at all. So I'm thinking I need to understand this because the information coming through my television is bogus. Clearly, they're trying to scare everybody. And that's not what you do when you're worried about people's health and well-being. You don't increase the fear because we all know that stress leads to more illness and sickness. Stress is really bad for you. And so if you're worried about a public's health, then you don't just bombard them day and night with scary images and graphs and a lot of messaging that seems to do the exact opposite of reassure and make people feel secure and healthy, right? So I started asking questions and casting a wider net for information sources that didn't seem to be so heavy-handed with the fear-mongering and the bullying and the thought policing type of messaging. And I found a variety of people doing really good work, sort of some of the people who operate in your sphere, and James Corbett and Last American Vagabond, Richard Grove. And when I got to Richard Grove and his Grand Theft World broadcast, he had an episode on in the early days with James Corbett, and I think it was episode 4. And in this episode, they were just going back and forth over all these books. And they were sort of saying, hey, have you read this one? And hey, what about this one? And I was thinking, what are these books that exist out there? And because the stuff that's in these books is stuff I've never heard of, but it's all about government corruption and mind control and all false flag events and all this stuff that I thought I should probably know about that. I'm in my 30s and I don't know about any of this stuff, but there's books out there that describe it and detail it. I thought, right, I'm going to get my hand on some of these books. And that began a sort of that continues to this day, a bit of an obsession with buying and hoarding books and trying to get my hands on the ones which tell the parts of the story, parts that are left out, pieces of the puzzle that are left out. And so that interest in preserving the physical copies of the books kind of dovetailed with my wanting to learn about this information. And I thought, well, I could share it with other people and hopefully there'll be people out there who appreciate it. And I've got a lovely little following, a really nice community of people who show up for the live streams now. And that's what we're doing, just going on this journey together and choosing the books as we go along and trying to connect them in and link them in to go. So we're building out this picture and following in the footsteps of the excellent researchers who've done this work and traveled down this path before.
I'm loving your bookshelf and library. Whenever I go into anyone who's got a library like yours, I could just sit there for an hour just perusing the books. And yeah, you mentioned Last American Vagabond. I've had Ryan on the podcast. James Corbett, I've been on the Corbett Report. I haven't been able to get through to Richard Grove. He's a very busy dude, but I wanted to go back. You were recently interviewed for Autonomy Quest. That's on your YouTube channel. It just may be something interesting for listeners because I fall in the same category. I think you mentioned, years back, you were quite shy, you said, and now it's kind of like you did a 180. And I was a total introvert when I was a teenager in high school. And I just was forced to learn to be successful in life, to get anything done. You have to be more extroverted. And, for some of the trolls out there, I never wanted to have a YouTube channel or a podcast. I was just a teacher traveling the planet, a vagabond, a nomad. I still am in a way. And I just wanted, kind of like you, I wanted to know what is going on. And that's kind of what drives me every day. I want to know. That's why I keep doing interviews with people. I'm like, help explain what's going on. And so I just started Skyping in experts into my classroom, and the podcast was born. And I just ended up here inadvertently, not seeking this. And I sort of hold it at arm's length. I'm always like, I'm happy to just disappear and stop this podcast and do something else. So it's not something that I'm seeking for fame, and you're definitely not making money doing this, but just your thoughts on your sort of transition to being more open and public.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny. I also have a background of teaching and traveling like you. So I went to university and I did English literature, which they don't tell you when you sign up, but that's not the best degree to have if you want to have a career or a job that pays, or knowledge of poetry and Shakespeare and sort of Victorian crime novels is not so useful to employers out there in the modern world. So at the end of my degree, I kind of had a bit of a crisis where I was thinking, what good is me doing in the world just sitting around analyzing poetry and writing essays on it? And so I looked for another avenue of work, and I found care work. And so I spent a number of years as a support worker for people with learning disabilities and autism and Down syndrome and these kind of conditions. And I found that was incredibly fulfilling work. I really liked working with people and helping people, and especially the sort of marginalized and the underdog and the people who deal with a lot of stuff that the average Joe and Jane might not even consider. But it doesn't pay. Criminally, the work which benefits human beings and individuals really doesn't pay. So I had to look for another thing to do. And what came across my radar purely through accidental happenstance was an invitation to go and teach English in South Korea. And it was actually a buddy of mine borrowed my computer, left his email inbox open, and he had an email saying, teach English in Korea, flights paid for, accommodation paid for, and you get a salary on top of it. And I thought, well, my job's going nowhere in terms of making money and being able to build a life for myself. I've never traveled really. I thought Korea was some sort of communist dictatorship, because I didn't really know, I didn't know anything about the North versus the South, and that it was split, and the history, because I wasn't aware of it. And I thought, yeah, why not? Total change of scene, out of my comfort zone. And so I did that. I was lucky at the time. I had a girlfriend and we went together. So it wasn't a total, just jump in there feet first on my own type of adventure. But I ended up living in Southeast Asia for 6 years, and I lived in Thailand. I went to Vietnam. I traveled around Malaysia quite a bit. And that whole experience of living in another country, adapting to another culture, learning bits of another language, trying to get by without all the familiarity of your home country was incredibly character expanding. You had to learn a lot of things and develop yourself and get away from the shyness. Because if you were just shy and you didn't talk to anyone, then nothing would get done. And I was teaching, so I had to get up in front of classrooms full of people who didn't speak my language. And there's nothing quite like staring at a room full of blank, confused faces when you're trying to explain to them and teach them, to really help you get over your shyness. But I still struggled with that. Throughout my whole time teaching, I would have anxiety and I would get worried about going up there and teaching. And And what I realized was that I really loved teaching, but languages wasn't my thing. I only speak English. I always felt like a bit of a fraud. I was like, if I'm going to teach a language, I should at least have learned a second language. I felt that way. So I kind of pocketed the teaching thing, but I gained immense value from getting up there and doing it despite the anxiety and the fear. And it was always the lead up to the lesson which freaked me out. And then once I was standing there in front of the room, it was like, well, you got to do something. You've got to, and even if you just improvise, make something up. Once I was in it, in the moment, in the lesson, my anxiety left. So it was always, and that might be a clue for other people out there who might be shy or dealing with this kind of introvert sort of, I don't want to say problem, but if you are introvert, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you want to be more extrovert, you have to just go and do the thing that you're scared of at some point. And you'll find that the analysis and the imagining of it beforehand is much worse than the actual thing that you got to go and do. So that really helped me gain confidence. And then you mentioned the autonomy course as well. So the reason I ended up involved in that was I got back to the UK and I went back to care work and I was teaching English as well. I was doing both jobs and they were 0-hour contracts. So they weren't secure. So I was just cramming in as many hours as I could to make ends meet and get some money. And I got married. And this beautiful, my wife, I still don't know how I got so lucky, and why she said yes. But when she did, we got married at the end of 2019. And then we all got locked down. And suddenly I'm thinking, okay, I don't know if my job's going to be secure, I'm going to need something else. Some other way to make money, some other way to bring income. And that's when I discovered autonomy and decided to enroll in that course to get some skills, to network with like-minded people who are more questioning of the mainstream narratives. And I enrolled back in, what would that be, 2021, I think. The beginning of 2021, I enrolled. And I still participate. I still drop in and say hello. And I still have relationships and friendships with people I met there. But that was where I started to try podcasting. And I would host a student podcast. I was incredibly nervous before doing that. But the first one, I didn't die and nothing terrible happened. And I went back to do another one and sort of cut my teeth there, talking about things I actually cared about. And this is when I kind of found my flow, where I mixed the confidence I gained and love of teaching with topics and information that I think is important, that's aligned with my values, my morals, and what I believe I can help people to learn about and understand. And so that was kind of my journey from being a bookish computer game addict to wanting to speak out and communicate with people all over the world, and sounding how I sound now, however that may be to those listening.
And as a teacher, I would say it's part entertainment. The way I viewed it, part of it is knowing what you're teaching, expounding upon, getting it across, but also in an entertaining way. And I recall, love him or hate him, Bono of YouTube. I've seen YouTube perform 10 times, but lately he's just been supreme. He's basically a liberal globalist, which is a shame, but. And he wrote a piece, I think, for Atlantic recently, and talking about his friend Bill Gates and all that. But anyways, that's a side note. But one thing that I think we can learn from everyone, including Bono. And he said something that he was asked if he still gets nervous performing, and he does. And that's kind of what you mentioned. Even when I would teach you, I would get slightly nervous at every class because high school, university, whatever. Because you might do something stupid and be called out for it. And you mentioned stress earlier. I did TNC radio. My very first time I ever did live radio, a live show, March 2022. I got physically ill the second after the first night because I'd never done live radio, and it's more pressure. I think it was a Monday, and then the Tuesday I was physically ill. I recovered quickly, but that goes back to stress. I left TNT because it was becoming stressful being the producer and host and everything all in one. But I found now that I don't have stress and work at a slower pace, I don't get sick anymore. I feel like stress is literally the number one cause. People talk about the whole virus, no virus thing. I feel like stress, I've family now that they've been severely ill with fever and all that stuff, and I'm hanging out around them and I'm not getting sick. And I feel like it's it's a stress thing. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. I saw you were looking back at your bookshelf. Was there anything you wanted to add, or?
Yeah, because talking about Bono just reminded me that I have a book about him. And I've also been to see U2, only the one time, but it was the first rock gig I ever went to. My dad took me there. Fond memories of that. It was on the Pop tour. I don't know if you went to see them on that one.
No, my first, I saw them 2001, I'll Let You Can't Leave Behind, I think 5 times on that tour.
All right.
And then on the 2004, was it that with that, forget the name of the album, How to Dismantle an Atomic Bomb. I think I saw them 5 times, but I saw them in Rome and Milan and St. Louis and Chicago, because they played multiple shows in Chicago, and I'd be in Croatia. I'm like, let's hop over to Italy and see them play in Italy. I think I was at one of the, when they recorded the DVD for the Chicago, I was at that concert. But anyways.
Oh yeah, so you just reminded me what you said at the end there about Bono and what he stands for. Reminding me that I have this book which I picked up, which you can see I got for £4, with him he's called The Frontman, and he's just gazing lovingly there into George Bush's eyes. And I think that tells you quite a lot. And it says, "In the Name of Power," which is a play on the title of their song, "In the Name of Love." So I haven't read through this one yet, but it's one that I picked up, and I thought I got to get my teeth into that at some point, because these kind of figures are so important. Bono, this character, pretty much everyone knows who he is, and they have an immense influence on the kind of zeitgeist and the cultural milieu of so many lives across the planet, So it was just funny you mentioned him, and I remembered I had that book. I thought I would mention it just in case anyone out there wants to get it. If they're in love with Bono, you might want to read that and perhaps see there's another side to his whole operation.
And I would just add nuance. Listeners, sometimes they're a little too extreme in their views. Where I was mentioning Nick Cave recently. I've also seen Nick Cave perform, and I very much appreciate his work. And someone was saying, "Oh, Nick Cave was at World Economic Forum." I'm like, I never found, why would Nick Cave go to World Economic Forum? But my point is, you can sometimes separate, in my view, the music and Bono. Bono, okay, he's this liberal globalist. I like some of the music, maybe sometimes I'll listen to, whatever. Just your thought on not throwing always the baby out with the bathwater. And that's what I do with my podcast. I'm an anti-communist, but sometimes I'll have Marxists on to listen to their analysis. And so it's kind of like you sort of separate stuff. And I think that's a more loving approach too, because otherwise you can't talk to anyone. Like I'll get the listeners are always throwing stones at me and my guests. Is kind of like, well, then you can't listen to anyone. Make your own podcast and just talk by yourself all the time, Just any thought there?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think you can separate the art from the artist. Of course, you got to bear in mind the intention behind which these things are created. And if you're aware of the impact, like let's take music for an example. Music is a really overrated mind control technique, because if you think about how permanent lyrics are etched into your consciousness, you can not hear a song for 10 years, it comes on the radio and you know every word for word, because of the rhythm, and the music puts those words into your mind probably till the day you die. You might have seen videos of people with dementia where they play them the music of their younger days, and their face lights up and they're transported back to this time. It's such a powerful hook into our consciousness and our mind. So you've got to understand that, but that doesn't mean that just because you don't like a person's character that you can't enjoy the music. As long as you're kind of aware of the way it's used and how it can be used for ill. And you're not just following this band or this particular singer with a kind of fervid religiosity where they are the savior and they are it's when you take it to ridiculous extreme levels, then I think I totally agree. You can enjoy it and not have to be a sort of a fanboy, let's say.
No, that's a strong point. And, I recommend Good Fight Ministries. They did a 10-hour documentary. I've got it behind me on they sold their souls for rock and roll, and how a lot of rock music is cult and literally demonic. And it's like, if you're going to, same thing with movies. Most of them are propaganda today. And so it's kind of like, if you understand the field and that it's propaganda or it's a cult or whatever, then, you can consume it knowing, you're not going to be deceived, whereas people who just willy-nilly come and they get influenced without understanding what's going on. And I'll just mention last night, sometimes I'll listen to music when to fall asleep, and I put on my biggest obsession was Soundgarden. That was my first band, Soundgarden, Chris Cornell, that I fell in love with. And I saw Chris Cornell. I actually saw them eventually perform, both Chris Cornell and Soundgarden when they came back together. But I put on Super Unknown. I haven't listened to Soundgarden in a long time. And looking back now, listening to the lyrics, you can sense he's always talking about like going down and hell, and it's pretty demonic, and you can sort of tell whatever happened to Chris Cornell, whether he was whacked or on drugs and suicided himself. That's also plausible, because you could see that through his lyrics and music he was tormented for decades. And it's kind of like, wow, listening to Super Unknown again, he keeps talking about like hell and going down, and just like, there's something here. But anyways, if you have any thought of that, but otherwise moving on, getting your thought on your theory of everything, getting your download as to what's happening. I treat my favorite topics are globalism, world government, the Great Reset, technocracy, World War III, all that sort of stuff. And so your thoughts on, what's going on, who's doing it, why, and all that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. I mean, let's see if I can condense this in a way that's intelligible. So as I mentioned, I only started paying attention to these kind of topics when we got locked down. I discovered Richard Grove's work, and his moniker that he has is the forensic historian, and he's built this whole brain model, which he's fed into books and articles and documentaries, and he's made a whole podcast series called The Peace Revolution, which goes back over the last sort of 100 years plus. And so my investigation started with Cecil Rhodes and the Roundtable Group and Lord Milner and Milner's Kindergarten, and how this group seems to have kicked off, or at least had a very strong hand in allowing World War I to happen and setting the stage for that to take place. The book that I read was one called Hidden History. It's by Jerry Doherty and Ian McGregor as well. And that book really blew my mind and really changed my whole understanding, my paradigm about who I am as an Englishman, because the narrative we get sold is like, oh, the good guys, the good guys always win, and we just went in there to save the world, and because we care about liberty and freedom, and we just wanted to defeat the evil people. And not being so into history, I just kind of assumed, yeah, that's probably the way it was. Never looked into it. So to hear about this hidden history book, to hear that, the members of the British upper echelons were playing a game that led to this senseless mass slaughter of so many young men in the most horrific conditions, was really powerful for me. And I started my area of inquiry kind of from that point moving forward. So I'm very much in this sort of camp of believing that there's this continuity which begins around Cecil Rhodes and his Rhodes scholarships, the will that he left, and by way of the creation of the Royal Institute for International Affairs and the CFR, and this sort of continuous effort to establish a kind of world government. So what most recently I've been really amazed by is that there are books going back quite a ways detailing a plan for world government and how that can be achieved, and arguing in favor of it and saying this would be a good thing and this is what we should do. One example that springs to mind that I haven't read yet, I was thinking I might next read on the channel, is a book called International Government. It was published in, I think, 1914 or 1916 by Virginia Woolf's husband and the Fabian Society. It's quite an old book. Just incredible to me that book exists, when you could go and tell people, hey, look, they want to build a one world government, and they'll be like, conspiracy theorist, you idiot. That's ridiculous. Of course they don't. I'm like, well, why have they written books about it? Why have they created groups, institutions that influence policy, think tanks? Why is there this continuity, which is never taught in the mainstream? You have to go off the beaten track into dusty old books and into dark recesses and corners of the internet and the alternative media to find people who are even aware of this and talk about it. So I'm still in that process of uncovering the way those those aspects link to the present day. So I'm talking about the Fabian Society, which I did a full reading of a book called Fabian Freeway on the channel by Rose Martin. That was published in 1966. Just all about how this tiny group of British intellectuals came up with this plan and then worked it over the long term, infiltrating different groups, setting up the British Labour Party, who very recently got elected here in England. So that connected to the present day. And just understanding that these groups are out there and they're still operating. They still have a large membership. The British Fabian Group Society provided every single Labour Prime Minister that we've ever had in this country. So and they're very open about what they want to bring in, which is socialism. And then I suddenly started thinking about these different isms that I'd never paid much attention to before. So the capitalism, socialism, communism, and realizing that the system we are living in is not as described. And we get told that we're in a sort of liberal, democratic, capitalist system, and we enjoy the most freedom of anyone on the planet. But then you actually look around and you realize that, oh, if I can't withdraw my consent to participate in this system, then I'm not very free, am I? I'm actually under quite a bit of coercion to continue participating in this system and paying into it. And bad things happen to people who point that out and fight back against it and try to get out of it. And so that casts a new lens over the system that I'm living in the current day. And so trying to go back and understand it and just see that it seems to have existed for a very long time. I think my long-term view of things is that there's always been a powerful, dominant minority who wield a knowledge gap over the majority. And that knowledge, I think I've heard you talk about before, Mark Passio. I'm a huge fan of Mark Passio as well. I've learned an incredible amount from him. And I think he is very good at explaining these occulted or hidden methods of mind control, both individual and group mind control. And I think that's what has enabled a minority to dominate for so long, probably as long as our records go back. So that's kind of my way of viewing it. This has always been the way it has. Not to say it always has to be this way, but you'll know as well as me that trying to point this out and talk to people about it, it doesn't make you rich. It's not what people want to hear. People usually throw money at people who tell them what they want to hear, right? So standing up there and saying, look, there's a lot of work we got to do, a lot of learning, a lot of like growth, self-development, maybe letting go of bad habits and treasure and things we like and we want to do. People don't want to hear that. So whether or not we could ever change things, get out of it, move it around, I don't know. I'm still in the learning phase, trying to understand the problem. But I think it's a dark, like psychopathic minority of people who they've just dialed in control of the human on both an individual and a group scale. And that's what they're doing, is continuous divide and conquer down every single avenue you can think of: men, women, young, old, Christian, Muslim, atheist. It's all just a way to get people throwing mud at each other on a sort of horizontal plane, and never doing the vertical plane, going, oh, wait a second, everybody. It's those guys up there that are causing this, the puppeteers pulling the strings. And so trying to do the work I'm doing is just trying to shine light on that picture that I feel like I clumsily described it, but hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, I've got a number of questions here just on the question of globalism, world government. And you're right. Now, you've got books, I've got a bunch of books, and ad nauseum, for centuries, at least a century, they write about this. I haven't had the time. I finished this book last year, and it's called Outlines, I think, of a World Civilization or something like that. It was a disciple of H.G. Wells. He was financed by World Orders Project, which is linked to some globalism, to the globalists and their funding. And it was a professor in 1970 published this book who I wanted to boil down in an article, and that led me to further research related to Nicholas Berggruen, who's now in the news kind of again. His institute published an article just a few days ago calling for world government. Like literally, it's like a mainstream institute, and they're saying like, look, people still won't relinquish nation states and nationalism. And it's basically, they're between the lines. They're saying they're trying to find a back door to install world government, because they're having coming in through the front door, they're having trouble. They're like, let's come in through the window or the back, sneak in. And basically the guy in this 1970s book says, look, there's too many people. We need to decrease the population. We need to install scientific dictatorship, technocracy. And we can begin, use a series of wars to freak people out enough into accepting world government. Like literally, that's what he says. And so it's not any conspiracy theory, but would you say my sort of thought has been, I obsess about this, geopolitics and empire, synonym for globalism, world government, and global governance, that for me, this is the most important thing. And I'm coming this also from a biblical Christian worldview where, you read the book of Daniel from the biblical perspective, there is an end to history, right? When Christ comes back, and that progressively things get worse and it culminates in a world state or world government. And so for me, like, that is the driver of everything else, of the wars, of the talk of climate change, of public health, pandemic. And in their own words, these globalists say, to solve public health or climate, we need to construct global governance. Now they're saying the AI is this threat. Well, to deal with AI, we need to construct an infrastructure for global governance. It's always like the same solution. And so just your thought on, for me, like, this is the most important topic to be discussing, because that's like the roots, and everything else sort of branches out from there.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. And what you start to realize as well is this problem reaction solution played over and over again. And so you get, what's the problem? What's causing the wars? Oh, it's nationalism. So we need to get rid of nationalism. And they can't just come out and announce a one world government. So they have to make people want it and prepare people's minds so that when they do announce it, people will be glad. Or even they don't announce it, they get people to the point where they're asking for it, begging for it. Please just set this one world government. We can't take any more of the situation. And I think that's the kind of playbook that we see a lot of the time, which is manufactured food shortages and resource wars. And there's clearly no will to solve a lot of the problems that the everyday average Joe and Jane in most countries faces, because it could be done. Like, there's no reason why all the problems that we face could not be solved. There's enough room for everybody. There's enough resources for everyone. Maybe not to have like a billionaire's lifestyle with a private jet flying around, but to have a good enough lifestyle where you're comfortable and you're warm and you're safe and secure and you enjoy some leisure time and you can travel a bit. There's no reason why that can't all be done. Apart from the fact that we have this minority who want to control it all. They want to set themselves up where nothing happens without their say-so. Nothing happens without their visibility. They want it all track, traced, and database. The data is really the weapon here, and so many people giving it up so freely is part of the problem. And I think that they will not stop manufacturing crises, setting things on fire, carrying out genocides, causing whatever weather events can be caused by these cloud seeding machines that exist. It's incredible the different vectors by which they're trying to drum up the requirement for this thing that they want to roll out. Because then they also attack people's ability to form like autonomous communities, which would be the solution. It would be small scale, localized, autonomous communities that are self productive, that produce everything they need for themselves on a small scale like that. And many of those all over the face of the earth, that would work. There's no reason why that wouldn't work, but because we've been hoodwinked into these interconnecting international systems of trade and import and export, it's got to the point now where people don't know how to extricate themselves from that. They can't even imagine not having a supermarket to go and get their meat and their vegetables from, or having an airport to fly out to other countries, or a device in their pocket to use to check facts in real time and get their social media dopamine quick fix. So it's incredible how dependent we've been coached to be dependent and manipulated and led to be so dependent on these systems, which are ultimately going to lead to our enslavement. And I think it's going to be, it's one of those situations where for most people, until that lock clicks behind them, they're not going to realize that they're standing in the cage. And that's what I realized over the last 4 years during, I call it the Big C event. I don't want to trigger any algorithm censorship, but I call it the Big C event. And through my efforts there of trying to spread awareness and share good information and get people to think logically and question things, I realized that for many people, unless they've got a boot on their neck or kicking down their front door, they're going to deny that this thing is happening. And so that fits in to this idea that there's a certain inevitability to what is happening, that I don't think any one person can change it. But I do think individuals have the power to change their own circumstances and their own immediate circumstances to a better situation where they are more able to ride out and weather what's coming. But yeah, I'm in total agreement. A one world system, and that goes back to books I've read on the channel. The Open Conspiracy by H.G. Wells was one of the first ones I read.
Got that?
You got
the shelf back there somewhere.
Nice. The only I love the camera that you're using because I can see you in beautiful high definition, but I can't read the books, and I'm like, oh, dude, you gotta.
It's got, yeah, I don't know. I'm not a tech guy, so like the background is blurred and I'm sharp and I don't know how to, maybe I'll figure that out someday.
No, it looks good. It looks better that way. It looks more professional. But for book nerds like us, it's kind of like, it's a bit titillating that I can see those books there and I can't quite read them.
Yeah, it's not my complete library either. At the bookshelf, there's a lower level. But going back to what you were saying, I'm losing my train of thought, world government, globalism. Yeah, I guess I'll just move on to the next thing. I was going to ask you about this talk of North American Union. All of a sudden now, the technate, right? And Trump is pushing it, and now even part of alternative media, independent media, is basically pushing globalism. And it's, that's quite shocking. And it seems like they're pressed for time now because we've got the European Union. No one ever talks about the African Union, but it's kind of what you were referring to earlier. It's quietly been developing behind the scenes. I just read an article a week ago saying they're going to create a Pan-African parliament. Like, it's quietly, they're not telling us about it, but they're building it up. And like one day it's going to be like, oh, look, here's the African Union. Here's the European Union. Here's a, South American Union. And it seems like they're pressed for time because Trump and company are aggressively now pushing for the North American Union and technate. And then, Putin and the BRICS crowd are pushing a Eurasian union, which is, I've found mainstream articles explaining how Putin and Nazarbayev's Eurasian Union is a carbon copy of the EU. Like, they've modeled it on the EU. So, so much for anti-globalist opposition there. And so sort of your thoughts on this whole North American Union thing.
Yeah, well, just that my first thought on what you just said was that I mentioned earlier that we're heading into this world government or this system of world control. Sometimes I think maybe it's already here. And I've said this on my channel a few times because, I can fly to, for example, Vietnam. I spent a few years living there, and I could take my UK cash card, stick it in a bank machine over there and withdraw money. So and wherever you go, it's the same internet that you connect to, and people are using the same kind of devices, and you're using the same sort of central bank system of creating money out of nothing and loaning it out at interest, right? And so there's more similarities than there are differences all over the world. So I think it's pretty much here. They just haven't come out and just said this is what it is, and it's possible that we're going into that sort of 1984 scenario. One of the things that I read recently was Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and then comparing that with the 1984 world of Orwell's book. And in 1984, you have these Eurasia and East Asia that are continuously at war. But isn't there like there's three states, and one's an ally and one's the enemy, and then it switches. And the main character, Winston, is like, I can remember somewhere in the deep recess of my mind when this was the other way around, when Eurasia was the enemy and Oceania was the ally. But now it's switched, and it's always been that way, and it's never been any different. That could be quite a revelation of the method, that there could be these three blocks, and then there'll just be this continuous ongoing narrative, kind of fake war going on to manage the population, right? So I don't know if we'll actually get to the stage where there's just a one world system and every country everywhere is under the same flag with the same processes and the same things in place. They might maintain a kind of pantomime of different blocks going against each other when really they're just shaking hands behind the scenes and in agreement on everything, because that's what you can see on the ground. Everyone's lives are being homogenized and standardized wherever you go. It's the same addictive technology in everyone's pockets. It's the same scrolling, endlessly scrolling mentality, and it's being rolled out all over the place. Digital money, same thing everywhere. Centralized control, whether that's at the national level or the supranational in the case of the EU or the BRICS or the North American Union. So I believe that the way I look at it is that every country and every system that's ever been tried is an experiment, and they want to see how it works, and does it work, and how much change and how many people go along with it, and how much pushback is there, and how many people do we have to slaughter to get this up and running, and they gather all that data. And then they feed that into the next thing that they try. This is the way I look at it. I really don't think that there's any independence between nations and groups. I think at the highest level, every group you can think of, it's the same club that running the whole thing. And they'll run communism over here and a capitalist over here and a system. And this country will have a slightly different one. And that one, we'll just let that one go and let the mafia cartels or whatever run that place. And it's all different experiments of running society, and then they take what works and they merge it with another one, and you get that sort of thesis, antithesis, synthesis. And that's kind of the way I look at it. That they're just perfecting the system, and eventually we'll all be under that perfected system. Whether or not they tell us that we're all under the same system, you could argue we already are.
Yeah, I've heard a few. I believe that as well. I've heard a few others say, Soviet Union was an experiment. If you think about like the whole Great Reset and stuff, that's almost like a 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 of Soviet Union, and what was done in China and how China is now. They're just like upgraded versions of a similar operating system. So I could definitely see, and I've even the EU, like people talk about EU is going to disintegrate. No, it's not. It's going to get stronger and build. It's an empire. I found this white paper. I can't find it anymore. I lost the bookmark, but it was a white paper from some globalist think tank discussing how from 2030, 2035, EU will disintegrate. And I could see that exactly. It's what you're talking about, where it might collapse, because they wanted it to, or because it was going to organically collapse anyways. And then they're just going to try again with take what they learned and create a, EU 2.0, or maybe they've learned and they'll create. There's been talk. Sarkozy put out creating a Mediterranean Union, an EU, and then like the Eastern Bloc of the intermarium countries like Poland creating their sort of, so they're experimenting, and I could see the EU that happening as well. What do you make of, alternative media now? Some portion of it doing a complete 180 and saying, promoting transhumanism, Elon Musk, and promoting Trump's integration of Canada and USA. It's kind of like, how do you sort of make sense of that?
By ignoring it mostly. No, what I mean is that I really don't take in a lot of media these days, from alternative or otherwise. I listen to a few select shows. I know you collab with Parallel Mike on your Cognitive Dissidence, which is a fantastic name, by the way. So kudos to whoever came up with that, because it's such a great name. I'm in Parallel Mike's group. I check in with your podcast. I check in with a few others, but not very many. Alan Watt, from cuttingthroughthematrix.com. I really enjoy his talks, and I'm in contact with his wife, who's continuing to put out maintain his channels and put out his talks, and she calls them the reduxes, where she re-releases them to YouTube and some other places. And then other than that, I'm focusing on my own thing, because I feel like I've seen enough and learned enough to be convinced that no household mainstream name is going to do any good for anybody, because they're all selected and picked and trained and coached. And I just view it all as theater at this point. And the discussions and the analysis as very much a kind of describing the shadows on the cave wall. I don't think so. I don't take it too seriously, and I've never been that into WWF, or soap operas. So I kind of view it through the same lens now, rightly or wrongly. And I could be completely wrong. I'm not claiming that there's no validity to any of it, and these are not real people with real agendas, with real power. But maybe I've just become so cynical that I just view it as like, well, obviously Elon Musk has not got anyone's best interest at heart. He's been propped up. He's been allowed to get to where he is. Wasn't there a novel about how a man called Elon was going to take us to Mars? Was it L. Ron Hubbard or somebody who wrote that? Or
so Werner von Braun?
That's it. Yeah, Werner von Braun. Yeah. So these kind of, and then with Trump, there was the Baron Trump series of children's books. So I'm very interested in predictive programming, methods of mind control, understanding how people are domesticated. Right, because I think the human race has largely been domesticated, and part of keeping people in their shackles is to provide them with this never-ending stream of entertainment and information and outrage and things to be shocked at and things to be scared of, and it's very paralyzing. And as somebody who's suffered a fair bit of analysis paralysis in the past, I kind of tire of it a little bit, and so I sort of tune out. But I think it's shocking to see when people are propping up that system as though it is real. It's sort of doublethink to me. When you look on the ground in your communities and your societies as to what's happening, the lives that people are living, the cost of just daily necessities. Maybe you're unfortunate and you're in a place with wildfires or flooding. We had some flooding in the city where I live recently. Touch wood, thank God it didn't affect my immediate area, but some places around here got hit pretty bad. It's incredible that the people look at the show that's being put on their television for them, and they believe that any of it is real or it matters. There was a brilliant short clip I saw of an American woman, I think, and she was pointing out how the Democrats and the Republicans can come together to ban TikTok, but they can't fix school shootings, and they can't fix the price of the food and the fuel, or the unemployment, or the opioid epidemic, and all these other societal problems. They can't fix them, but they can come together to get an app banned. So their priorities are not our priorities, and I think it would do a lot of people very well to unplug and decompress and focus more on, all right, where do I need to get in my life so I don't get dragged down, with the sinking ship.
Yeah, and just on that, just to add, what I was going for was, we've got the mainstream media, and then you had this, in the 2000s, this creation, James Corbett, Alex Jones InfoWars. I mean, you go down the line. And how is it that some of these alternatives, these counters to the apparent mainstream globalist media, that they are now pushing globalism? And I think Orwell in 1984 is so important, because I think Orwell was in the room with the globalists, and what he wrote down was literally their plan. And it talks about O'Brien being the real author of Goldstein's book, and Goldstein's book is it would be like Alex Jones InfoWars, right? Like the book of the dissent and rebel. And then it's revealed that the globalists actually wrote the dissident handbook, and it was sort of some psyop, also to entrap, to see who would be the dissidents to read that. And that kind of, for me, explains sort of like an Alex Jones figure now, who's promoting Elon Musk. I mean, I was listening to the thing that gets me is one of the many, not the only, but one of the many sort of inspirations for me doing what I'm doing was InfoWars early on, and a plethora of other podcasters and radio spaces. And just to see him now do a 180 is just I'm trying to comprehend it. And I was listening to his feed the other day, one of his shows, and he, for literally a half an hour, he can't shut up about Elon Musk. And he's saying we should integrate Canada and USA. And I'm like, dude, 15 years ago, you're saying this is a bad thing. Now you're saying it's a good thing. And it's obviously a bad thing, because it's globalism. It's centralizing global power. Just, any thought on sort of the psychology there, and
Yeah.
so, and because we are in this space, so some of our peers now who were previously like on our side in the sense like globalism is bad, world government bad, and now they're like they switch sides, like, oh, it's good, let's go, rah rah.
Yeah, great point. I think people have got bills to pay, and the cost of everything is going up, and people have mortgages, and they probably foresee, particularly in our space, the fraudulent nature of the monetary system. And you'll have talked to Mike, and Mike's acutely aware of how this system is all built to end. It can't go on forever. It has to end. Something has to give at some point. We don't know when, we don't know how, we don't know what it'll look like. And he could be wrong. I don't know. But I tend to trust in Mike's analysis as very sober. So knowing that there's some sort of, I don't want to say the collapse, I don't know if it'll be a collapse, but some sort of reset, if it's a great reset, some sort of correction is coming. It could just be a case of like, well, I got to make as much as I can while I can to shore up my own situation to get through that. But it could also be telling us that a lot more of these people are reading from scripts than we thought, which makes sense. If you want to, was it a Lenin quote, like, "Will lead the opposition yourself" is the best way to fend it off, and then the Albert Pike of providing the heroes. Will provide the heroes for everybody. I think there's some truth to that. There's always another cul-de-sac to walk down. Mark Passio describes the last cul-de-sac before the gold mine. That's how he describes the New Age movement, and he says it traps so many people who are paying attention and learning how things work, and then they get stuck in the New Age movement, and then that's it. They're gone because they just stay there. And I think that's how the playing field is designed. It's like, okay, so you've made it out of the mainstream. Well, how about this little cul-de-sac and this fascinating angle on things that you haven't considered before? And it's all prepared and provided for us, because you really have to pay attention to those who start paying attention, and you have to make sure you neuter them somehow. You lead them off into a never-ending, fruitless journey of discovery that never gets them anywhere, even though they get that feeling that they're making progress. So I think a lot more of it could be controlled and scripted than we would like to believe. I think having a healthy skepticism is very important. And yeah, anyone who thinks any mainstream political figure is some sort of hero, in my opinion, you don't get anywhere near those positions unless you've already signed the deal. Whether that's the deal that you sign at the crossroads, in order to get really good at playing guitar, some sort of deal like that has got to be signed, or you've got to be compromised, or you have to have made your vow, paid your dues, whatever it is, because I don't think they can really, because I view it all as actors and a stage play, a performance, and performative. So if somebody's pointing at and analyzing that stuff and not telling you, or not at least not telling you, because we don't know for sure, but at least not asking the question, could this all be scripted? Then they might be part of the script. They might be part of the performance.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add something to that, because I did have a question about Mark Passio, and I like how you talk about these cul-de-sacs. I'm going to bring out, there's no virus cul-de-sac, or it's the Jews cul-de-sac, and the thing that gets me is that people just get stuck in there, and all they talk about all the time is no virus, there's no virus, it's the Jews, it's the Jews, it's the Jews. And it's just kind of like, it's a much bigger picture. And don't get me wrong, there is a Zionist Jewish faction, just as there is, I'm not saying that it's evident by now. It's so evident. There is Israel lobby, John Mearsheimer. I read that book 20 years ago. I've got it. I think my physical copy is in a box in Croatia somewhere. And then you've got the Jesuit, Vatican faction, Operation Gladio, all that blah, 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 CIA, Knights of Malta. You've got Freemasonry, the occult faction. And, someone left, I interviewed Robert D. Kaplan, globalist insider. He worked with the Pentagon. Someone listened. They were pitched to have him on. I'd like to talk to everyone. Why not? And someone's left a comment on the Rumble is that if you invite degenerate Zionists like Robert Kaplan into your home, you become one of them. And it's kind of like, I've interviewed Alan Sabrowski on TNT Radio, who rails against the Jews. I've interviewed E. Michael Jones, Lucas Gage. Do I get any brownie points for talking to It's the Jews guys? No, and so it's just like, again, going back to what we said, nuance. And then what else was I going to say? The Mark Passio, I really loved when I came across his occultocracy definition.
Yes.
And that jives with my biblical worldview. I'll take stuff that makes sense for me and formulate as my thesis. And as a Christian, he's not a Christian. He seems to be kind of Gnostic, Mark Passio still. But he's a former Satanist, and he said that it's an occultocracy, that it's this group of elites that are made up of, as I mentioned earlier, these different factions, moneyed class, they're different ethnicities, right? And so for me, that makes the most sense, occultocracy. Because for me, at the end of the day, the buck stops at Satan, Lucifer. And so even It's the Jews people don't talk about, hello, Satan, Bob Dylan said he's the field commander, Satan, Lucifer. And so just your thought on the occultocracy for you, where, we'll never know, but I always like to have my guests speculate. Where is their lair? The HQ of the occultocracy, and what's sort of the closest you feel you've gotten to figuring out who's running the show?
Yeah, great. I really agree with all the points you just laid out there as well. I'm of the opinion that they don't, and I think I'm right in saying this is Mark Passio's explanation, is they don't have a name for themselves, because why would you if you didn't have to give yourself a name that people can talk about, then you're harder to define and point to. And so I kind of tend towards every group, secret society, organized religion, government, political party, corporation, foundation, institute, think tank, all these groups, I think at the very highest levels of all of them, that's who we're dealing with. And they could be from any race, any creed, any background. I think what they have in common is just a desire for power and a willingness to do anything to get it. And I think they'll work with any worldview, with any system, any political system, and they'll rise to the top of any group because they're psychopaths, and that's what psychopaths are good at, and that's what they can do, is manipulate people and climb the ladder. This is why so much of the corporate world is like psychopathic, and is to do with people manipulating each other and lying and being very cutthroat and sort of brutal in the way that they deal with the people below them, and then very kiss ass and brown nosy to the people above them, right? And not just fair and decent with everybody, no matter what, because this sort of pyramid structure, which everything is, whether that's a government with a president at the top, or a corporation with a CEO at the top, or a religion with a pope at the top. They're all pyramid structures everywhere you look. Every single time it's a pyramid structure. Now, sometimes you get maybe a group at the top, a round table, a board perhaps, but it's those people at the very top of these things. And they're just wielding, like I said earlier, that knowledge of getting the people below them to work for them and to give up their time and energy and attention and sacrifice it for the maintenance of this pyramidal structure. And so I think, pointing to the Jews, it's a cul-de-sac. Obviously, not every Jew in the world is the problem, right? There's probably some that are, but just the same way saying, the whole problem is with colonialist white men. Well, no, I'm sure some of them are white, but I'm sure some of them are not white as well. And so this is my feeling, because I think every take a group of people anywhere on the planet, and a certain proportion of them are going to be psychopaths, power hungry, willing to be ruthless, willing to lie, cheat, steal, murder, do whatever is necessary. And I think the families and the families who've done that over the long term, multi-generationally, in order to build up massive amounts of wealth and influence, they're the people we'd be best off looking at. But they're kind of harder to. I haven't really read about them. I've got a few books on the Rothschilds, for example, and I read one on the channel which was a bit of a puff piece. It was just all about how incredibly business savvy they were, and amazing, ahead of their times, and generous and kind and philanthropic. You know, it was really bigging them up, which I found funny. But I think that's more likely, like intergenerational bloodlines. Another area of research that I'm very interested in is, for example, the Huxley family, the overlap with the Darwin family. You got T.H. Huxley, who was Darwin's bulldog, and then the various members of the Huxley line and the Darwin line keep marrying each other over the years. Then you've got Aldous Huxley and his brother Julian. Julian became the first director of UNESCO. So you can see that there's also a bloodline element to it as well. And then you've got banking families and dynasties. And of course, that's another really massively important factor is the money. And where does the money come from? And why does this group of people get to print the money and control it and force everyone else to use it? And that's never questioned by any of the politicians. Like, when's the last time a politician stood up and said, do you know what? This central banking system, it's terrible. It's not helping people. It's enslaving people. We'll do away with it and get something else that serves people. Like, I'm pretty sure you would get whacked very quickly if you did that. And the fact that none of them ever do is another sign that they're just puppets reading from a script. So that's kind of my thoughts. It's every group you can think of, and the very, very top of those groups working together in cahoots. And sometimes they got to put on a show of rivalry and war and competition. But I think at the very top, they're eating their caviar together and smoking their expensive cigars together and chilling out on each other's boats.
Yeah, you're mentioning Jews, and I know a few Croats who we can lump in this group. The Croats running Croatia, who are Brussels remote-controlled globalists, right? Plenković and, Kolinda, our former female Croatian president. I think she's working for the World Health Organization now, ultra pro-NATO, full-on globalist. But, and I would just add, I think there is among the elite and occult ideological element. Not necessarily every single elite, I'm sure. Again, it's a mix of people. There are people that are just in it for the money, that they're a member of Bilderberg or something. And then others who are part of these secret societies who know intentionally what they're doing. And I think, and you mentioned the corporate world, where I worked in Mexico, the top school there. Great place to work. And you find these narcissistic, sociopathic psychos. And I had an experience when I was in Kazakhstan with a number of the other foreign workers. There was this person from New Zealand who was a know-nothing home economics teacher, lecturing me. This is what the narcissists do. They put you down, and they are the experts. And this person was lecturing me, who knew better on international relations. And I'm like, treating me like a kid. And I'm like, in front of other people, I'm like, and I didn't take anything. I fire right back, and I'm like, wait a minute. I studied diplomacy in Switzerland. I worked at the United Nations and EU. I shook hands with Gorbachev. I interview all these people, and I'm like, and you're some economics teacher, and all of a sudden, it's like when you look at narcissists the way, and for me this was the first time I really came across at this level of true sociopathic narcissists, and the book that really helped me understand first what I was up against and how to deal with it. Eventually, this person was let go. I told my employers, I'm like either fire this person, transfer me to another school, or I quit. And they eventually got rid of that. The person. Nice. I guess I was deemed more valuable. But Bob Sutton, he wrote a few good books. I think one of them is The No Asshole Rule, and he really goes. They had the book in Russian, and in Kazakhstan at the bookstore, I bought literally like 5 copies of Bob Sutton's book in Russian and handed it out to the administrators at the school. But then to ask you about sort of just your further thoughts, we talked about world government sort of being the number one thing. My number 2 thing is what I like to call the algorithm ghetto, because I interviewed in June of 2020 Edwin Black, the famed Jewish historian who wrote about the IBM and the Holocaust and eugenics, the master race. And I like his term for the social credit system, the digital gulag, cyber gulag. And basically, this is my number 1 threat as well, because the walls are closing in. Many of us have seen deplatforming, debanking. I can't renew my bank debit card now because I don't have my Mexican national ID. I'm banned from
Wow.
PayPal, from Patreon. I sometimes get secondary screening at the TSA when I fly back home to America. I'm a terrorist now, like Tulsi Gabbard, right? She was under that TSA, was it Blue Something Skies surveillance program. So the walls are closing in, right? Europe now is activating Soviet-style controls. So if you're not a European, you go to Europe. It's called ETIAS. UK is now activating that as well. Mexico seems to be flirting with that sort of stuff. And so what are your thoughts when it comes to the whole neo-feudal Great Reset technocratic agenda of digital IDs, CBDCs, travel controls, the death zero, net zero agenda, as I like to call it, death zero. In many cases, you're in airstrip one. That's like ground zero where they're implementing the ULEZ and all this crazy stuff. And so what do you sort of make of the algorithm ghetto?
Yeah, well, just one thing I'll say as well about Edwin Black. Great interview, by the way. I did go and check that one out because I reviewed his book, IBM and the Holocaust, on my channel. It was one of the first books I read that, again, another mind-blowing book that I couldn't believe I didn't know that about IBM and that company was still in business and still prominent.
But wait, Nick, he's a Jew, so we can't. The book it's all fake and made up. I mean, he uses this like document, and again, separating nuance. It's just I know there's gonna be like one or two commentators like, yeah. Anyways.
And his book, his first book, The Transfer Agreement, which I think I'm correct in saying that his parents basically disowned him for publishing this because it was all about this agreement to help Jews escape Nazi Germany and move to Israel. And this agreement, I haven't read it, so I'm not going to be able to explain it very well. But to my mind, IBM and the Holocaust was incredibly well referenced and researched and watertight, an incredible bit of writing. And I'm really looking forward to reading Transfer Agreement. So yeah, it's crazy that people will just, they'll probably not listen to us if we make certain hand gestures, or if I tell you my
back Illuminati confirmed. I used to have my high school students here in Mexico. They would joke. We'd make memes. They'd print out flyers and put them on my teachers. Illuminati confirmed. Like it was a joke. I mean, some people take this too far. Anyways, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, with regard to technocracy and the rollout of it, I mean, a similar position that I have to the world government thing is like it's kind of already here. I mean, most people use electronic money already. Because they just use a card or an app, and the digits go down in one bank account, they go up in another bank account. And you don't think the banks are putting a few dollars into an envelope and sending it on a cyclist to deliver it to the other bank, do you? So, I mean, electronic money is pretty much already here. It's the programmable aspect of it that is really terrifying. And when that gets plugged into your online presence, whatever form that may be, whether that's your Facebook profile or your Twitter profile, who knows what that's going to look like. But with the advent of these large language models and these quote unquote AI tools, which I don't think calling them intelligence is correct. To my mind, to be intelligent, you need consciousness, you need probably some sort of nervous system, a body. I don't think you can call ones and zeros and algorithms intelligence, but they are certainly good at mimicking text, chat, and analyzing written text in vast quantities very quickly. But when all this gets plugged in and activated for real, it's going to be an incredibly scary world to live in. My biggest question is what's going to be the event that precipitates that and makes people want it and ask for it and move on to it. I'm not sure if there is going to be one, judging by how comfortable young people are with using it. I think the world controllers, and that's not my phrase, that's a phrase from Aldous Huxley. He calls them the world controllers in his book, Brave New World Revisited. The world controllers, they work on massive time frames. Most of us, we work on a week, a month, payday to payday, maybe a year. We're just waiting for Christmas or our next birthday or something, or a holiday next year. These guys, they're doing decades, 50, 10, 5, 10, 50, 100-year plans. So it might just be, from their point of view, that they just keep us, I say us, the people who are trying to warn about this, busy with analyzing, what did Elon just post, and what did Trump just do, and we're analyzing all this stuff. Meanwhile, our children, I don't have children, I don't know if you do, but our children are getting hopelessly sucked into a tech addiction, and so obsessed with this screen and what's on it and and the information it feeds to them, that they walk straight into this digital gulag system that is being prepared at the moment. So this is why, to my mind, one of the biggest things that we can address and try and help people with and talk to people about is screen addiction. And so I'll give you another book recommendation here. I'm reading this at the minute. This is 4 Arguments for the Elimination of Television by a guy called Jerry Mander. Yes, that is his real name. Jew, I should mention, for the people who don't like reading books by Jews. But he wrote that book back in 1978, and it is fantastic. And he's explaining how the television as a technology cannot be reformed, and how it is completely incompatible with any kind of democratic system, and how it is the perfect piece of technology to bring in an autocratic regime because of its standardizing of people's behavior, by which he means, imagine 80 million people all sitting in a dark room staring at a glowing rectangle. Imagine what they would be doing if those glowing rectangles didn't exist. Well, you can't, because there's such a crazy variety and breadth and depth of all the activity that they could be involved in. But it's standardized because they're sitting watching this glowing screen now. So it's a really good book. And that was in the 70s. So before internet, before smartphones, before the infinite scroll and the social media and all the stuff we're dealing with now. So to my mind, that's the angle we need to go at, is to really try and get people to disengage from their screens, to read more books, which is, the thing that I try and talk about most and encourage. Play some board games, go for a walk, pick up an instrument. I always see your beautiful instrument at the back there. And, and
I got board games right there. So I got my
the board games too. Nice.
I got a Turkish oud, which I first started playing because I learned guitar. And then I think in the 2000s, I was taking lessons in Chicago on the Turkish oud. And then I got board games right behind me, Diplomacy, some funky ones, Confusion by Robert Abbott, fantastic game, espionage and deception in the Cold War, Twilight Struggle, Pandemic. I had Pandemic before the pandemic. We were playing Pandemic, the board game, Junta, Viva el Presidente board game.
Yes.
And so,
Pandemic, that came out in 2007. I was talking about it the other day.
I bought
we were
it.
talking about predictive programming.
I bought it, I believe, in Canada when I went to Quebec for a month, like 2015, 16, with the summer school of the students, and I found this amazing board game. Imaginarium, I think, was the place. It's in Quebec, and they had all these. We're all used to like Monopoly and Risk, and then I didn't know that there's a whole new world to board games that are amazing that you've never heard of, and Pandemic and all this stuff. But to go to one of your point, TV, I intuitively, once I discovered, I hadn't read Jerry's book, Mander, 4 Arguments for the Elimination of TV, but I sort of, going down the rabbit hole in the 2000s, I intuitively understood I want nothing to do with television. And so since I left and became a vagabond, I decided never to own a TV. In fact, here in my house in Mexico, we have no TV. I don't have a TV. We don't have TV screens. And so the kids are not subject to it. Once a week, we'll watch some movie or program. They'll have a couple hours a week, but they're not clamoring for it, and they're playing violin, they're teaching themselves chess, piano, all that stuff. And it's just kind of like, it's okay. I consume a lot of screen time but I don't feel like it does affect us. Even if you kind of go in knowing, as you say, I spend too much time on the screen, but I'm learning, I'm doing stuff. But and I guess my other point was just a final note on, Half-Life. I enjoy video games from time to time, and Half-Life, the video game team, Half-Life 2, where they're in City 17, so they're in this sort of dystopian technocratic future, and they're basically living like serfs in City 17. And just any further thought, I think it's going to become difficult because we're going to really soon start feeling travel restrictions. I read Ryanair now you will not be able to purchase flights on Ryanair anymore without the digital app. And so you're going to be forced, because I sometimes like to have this. I think there have been occasions where maybe I fly to the U.S. without my smartphone. I go without my smartphone. What I don't really need it. Maybe I take my laptop to do work, but I don't have a smartphone. In the near future, it's like you won't be able to travel. It's like for me, it's hard to comprehend. I go to the airport, I have my ticket, I printed it out, and like, oh, you can't board. Like, you need your phone with the app, and you got to scan your forehead, or scan the QR code. And I'm like, I can't. What?
I've got the solution though. If you don't want to carry your smartphone, you can just have a chip. Just put it into your skin, in your part, and you don't have to carry the smartphone around. Problem solved.
It's gonna be wild. So, any further thought on living in the city 17, and then the crypto? Yeah, you have any thoughts on Bitcoin or crypto at all?
Yeah, again, I think it's to train people to get used to digital life, a digital world where everything is mediated by this technology and pixels. So getting people to believe that ones and zeros are valuable, and they're only valuable if people believe it, and you can change it into money, which you can then go and use to buy the thing that you actually want, whether that's the food or the fuel or the board games or the books in our case. That's the real valuable stuff, the actual tangible physical thing. And the other stuff is all imaginary and illusory. But I think we're being conditioned through the pumping and dumping. Wasn't there like a Trump coin that was pumped and dumped over the last 48 hours or something? And his wife did one as well. I think,
yeah.
So, I mean, that tells you. And then Doge, they actually called Department of Government Efficiency Doge after a meme coin. It's comical. It's funny. This is why I love Farrell Mike so much as well, that he emphasizes so much precious metals and his advice on how to preserve and grow wealth, and his thinking on that, which is much more aligned. I like the term God's money, these precious metals, and it's physical, it's tangible. You can hold on to it, you can look at it, you can mold it and shape it, and you can do something with it in the real world. So to my mind, crypto is just another avenue to hook people into the digital realm, the meta sphere, maybe, and get people existing out of 3D world and in 2D world, because it's an internet, it's a world wide web, and it's a blockchain. Nets, webs, and chains. Like, the words are in there to tell you what this is all for. And so, moving forward, I think it would be a good idea for people to get savvy with decentralized technologies. I know there's different projects out there. There's one such as Quartal. I don't know too much about these. I'm not super tech savvy, but I like the idea, for example, of having a home server of some sort that people can connect to securely. And I do have a friend who's very savvy with Linux, and she uses an OS on her laptop, which is entirely command line driven. And it's a version of Linux. And, it looks old school because it's just command line, but she can do everything that I can do on my laptop and more. And there's no bloatware, right? So there's none of these self-updating operating systems with backdoors and data harvesting that slows everything down. It's a super streamlined operating system, and it will give new life to old machines. So if you pull all the Windows and the iOS off. I'm not sure about iOS, but at least with laptops, if you pull all Windows off and you install this version of Linux called Arch Linux, which is command line only, it takes up such little space on your machine that your machine will last another decade, maybe, up to a decade. So you can invigorate old machines. You can strip all of this spyware, techware, and surveillance tech out of it, and retool the stuff you have and get secure private communications with other people. Now, it's a learning curve, and it's finding the other people who can do that and who can, and then putting the time in, because it's not everyone's cup of tea to learn command line prompts and to navigate boring looking windows with green text. But if you're a fan of the film The Matrix, you kind of get to feel like you're a cool, nerdy hacker type person, and that's a lot of fun too. So I think that's an aspect to it, is exploring these kind of ideas and alternatives. There's a little device you can get as well called the Raspberry Pi. Have you heard of those before?
Yeah, I've heard of that. Yeah.
So Raspberry Pi 5. And you can set up a little space on that people can connect to externally, that's private and secure because it's in your home and you've got hold of it. But of course, there might be something coming down the pike whereby we're restricted in our access to the internet. Maybe you got to do an eyeball scan or a fingerprint scan or some sort of biometric thing, or you've just got to have a certain social credit score even to get internet privileges or to get unrestricted internet privileges. You know, you can see a system whereby your score, whatever this, however it's calculated, restricts what you can and can't see. Like, oh, you're only allowed to access Wikipedia now. You know, you're guilty of too much wrongthink and thought crime that now all you can look at when you connect to the internet is Wikipedia and nothing else. So they might bring it down to this granularity. And I do think that is desirable for the powers that shouldn't be, for the world controllers. I think they would like that granularity of every single person being in their own totally unique, personalized cage of control based on every single action, you know. And then you put the requirements in place for what people have to do to earn the privileges. So you got to walk more, or you have to. Did you ever see that episode of Black Mirror where they sit on the bicycle to earn points?
Oh yeah, I've seen all of the Black Mirror stuff, and even here where I am in Mexico, I forget the name of it. They had released a few years back. I don't know how far it's gone, or if it's dead in the water, or if they're making a second version of it. They created a social credit currency, and they tried to onboard local businesses here in where I am in Mexico, and where if you could prove that you cycled or walked, you would generate currency in this coin, which then you could use to purchase real food in restaurants. For the life of me, I can't remember the name, but they've already been prototyping this stuff here. And you know, I like to joke. I like to throw in funky cultural references. You know, look to your orb for the warning. That's a song from a Monster Magnet, Dave Windorf. Was it Dopes to Infinity, 1990s, I think. And World Coin. Now they renamed it World, so it's just World. And here in Mexico, again, like you think it's just in the first world. No, it's Africa, it's Mexico, Latin America, Asia. They are now deploying world orb scanners. And so in Mexico City, they set up an office, and then they're going to retail spaces in Mexico, and I'm sure other countries, where they're setting up orbs for you to scan your soul into. And now their next iteration is where you can just order an orb sent to your home to scan your soul, your eyeballs.
No way.
And that's their next phase. And I'm wondering, like, eventually, if they could just put an orb on a drone and send the drone, you know, to your home to scan your soul away. And I was joking, you know, once we're shut out of the algorithm ghetto, Nick, I was trying to think of bees. We got board games, books, booze, bullets, bullion beans, beasts of burden, you know, animals for meat. And on Windows 11, you know, Windows 11 is coming up. And I think for a long time, we've all been able to kick the can down the road, so to speak. You know, Windows XP, you had Windows XP, 7, they said was the best. Windows 7, Windows 8 sucked. Windows 10. And I feel like now we've reached the end of the line, finally, for sure, because with Windows 11, you've got AI recall. And so they're going to be just screen capturing absolutely everything you do. And it's like, that's never been the case so explicit. And it's like, okay, now we really have to jump ship from Windows 11 and do Linux, use Windows 10 for as long as possible. But now the walls are closing in, as I said earlier, in many ways. In many respects, the walls are closing in.
People are being trained as well. Sorry to interrupt, but it just reminded me of an example, like a real world example now, that you can't do anything without giving your name, your address,
just on that. My goodness, I went to Walmart in Mexico, buy some stuff. They do this every time. I'm checking out. I got cash. I'm paying in cash, and the guy's like, "What's your phone number?" And I'm just like, "What?" And then like so many people give their phone numbers to buy food, that I'm like the only guy who doesn't. And like I'm the crazy one. I'm like, why do you need my phone number to buy food? Like, are you gonna ask me for my blood the next time I buy some bread, like my DNA or like a DNA sample? Like, but it's just I can't fathom it. I can't.
To send you your receipt, because paper's bad for the planet, right? So if they
I think to get your discount and to be part of that, but that's the social credit system, because that's then later combined with your other points of database collection. So anyways,
Yeah, we have supermarkets here, and not every item, but lots of the items have two prices on, and the second price is for people who have the app and give up that data. They get a discount on a lot of things, and it's a significant discount. When the economy is being run in such a way that the times are tight for everybody, and the inflation is devaluing the money in your bank account. These are really insidious practices to nudge people into just accepting them and using them. And another example is when you go to post things internationally. I wanted to send some pictures to a relative in Canada, and the amount of information I had to give to the guy in the post office about myself and where I lived and what was in the thing and why I was sending it and who I was sending it to, it was like, it's none of your damn business. I've got an address. I've got an envelope here. It's sealed. Your job is to put it and send it. No way. And then my dad, he tried to send a little gadget, like a USB gadget that you plug into your TV, over to Cyprus. And the amount of scrutiny he got. Does it have batteries? Have you messed with it? Have you changed the software on it? Where is it going? Have you opened the packet? And he was like, it was delivered to me from Amazon. They didn't have to fill out all this nonsense and go through they have special status. It's Amazon. They don't have to go through all this scrutiny, but you do, because for your safety or something. I don't know. Shut up. Fill out the form.
It's mind-boggling, and it's what you said earlier too. That I forgot to comment on that. The plebes who are just all okay with this, and I've given up in that sense where I'm doing what I'm doing for myself, and anyone else on the same frequency, and the rest of y'all, you figure it out. You guys have fun having the boot smash on your face. I'm going to try to get out of Dodge before that, because, yeah, it's basically Stockholm Syndrome. It's the Matrix analogy. They probably, the powers that be, put the Matrix out there, part of the whole O'Brien Goldstein thing, I think. But yeah, it's kind of like, anyways.
Well, I agree. And actually, one of the things that, so when I joined Autonomy, I went through a real revelation and a reevaluation of my entire worldview. I just never questioned certain things before. And I started to learn about things like Darwinian evolution and versus intelligent design. And I started to listen to Jay Dyer, and he does his transcendental argument for God. And he has a lot of debates with various religions and atheists. And I listened to a lot of that. And it totally changed my worldview. And looking back on The Matrix, which was my favorite film for a long time, I still love it. It's still a great film. But when it first came out, I was too young to see it in the cinema. And I had to wait till Christmas, and I got it on VHS, and I opened it and I was like, The Matrix, and I went and I put it in the machine and I watched it. And when it finished, I hit stop, I hit rewind, I hit play, and I watched it again, back to back twice. And that's a really Gnostic film, because the whole thing is about you being the one and being the savior and learning how to stop bullet. And Neo means, is the anagram of one. And then when I started listening to Jay Dyer and I started thinking about intelligent design and learning about the holes in Darwinian evolution, and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, this place does actually look designed. And if it's designed, then it has to have a purpose. And then you realize that, like The Matrix, the thing that's left out of it is the creator. There's no metaphysical, spiritual mention of anything. There's an architect, but he's a software program, right, in the second film. And I just realized that, like, that is part of why that film is so prevalent and pushed, and even why we have the red pill, blue pill symbolism in our sort of circles that people we talk to and we work with, right? That red pill, blue pill metaphor is so prevalent there. And even that is misleading, because it's taking you away from this idea of intelligent design, of there being a purpose, of there being a creator. I don't go much further than that. I'm not signed up to any particular religion or belief system, apart from this place was obviously designed. This place therefore must have a purpose. And if we pay close attention to what's going on and how things work, to what's going on within us and without us and our relationships, and then we can experience a much greater quality of life and not be much less likely to get sucked into this materialistic, scientific, technocratic, digital slavery system.
Yeah, and I'm not afraid. I know this irks some people. Take it or leave it. I don't care. It's my podcast, and I like. I would love for more people to come to Jesus. I take a cue from what you said, that I just can't shake Jesus and the God of the Bible. That and because, as you said, it's obviously atheism. Come on, guys, everything is so sophisticated. All of the systems of the earth and the animals and our eyeballs and the veins and everything is just perfectly. It's like an operating system. So somebody created it. Who did it? Why is there always this obsession with attacking Christianity, attacking the natural order and nature of things, the transhumanism, it's all anti-human inversion stuff. And, Satan, the biblical sort of Satan is being thrown in your face with all these music videos where they're literally having sexual relations with Satan and fondling him. And so for me, that's my worldview. And I did also want to ask you about just any other final thoughts, any other things that we haven't brought up that you think is important. I also thought, because you're in the UK, just want to get your further thought on the Great Reset project, where the decline of the West, right? You being a UK
Right.
and Europe, and Trump is now the 47th president, America, Oceania. It just seems like part of the goal is to redistribute wealth to the third world, to build up, for the purpose of building up their infrastructure of the global South, their technocracy infrastructure. So it feels like that's the whole in the world. I like how you say world controllers. I'm going to start using that more. I mean, that's Huxley's term, I think you said. And I think the purpose is they can't control the third world fully because it's cash, it's people are not banked. And so they're going to transfer the wealth from the West to the East so all of the rest of the world can join in on the fun and be locked into the algorithm ghetto. And so I think any thoughts on Canada, USA, the West, UK, Europe? You sort of see a decline there and the wiping out of the middle class.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think you summarized it really well. What's happening now is that they've got enough of their control systems in place in the quote unquote first world, wealthy countries. We're all online. We've all got our smartphones. They've got enough data on us. We are, as you mentioned, we have our digital money already pretty much in place. Social media profiles ready to be plugged into the digital money. So those systems are all up. They've largely got rid of cash. They've largely got everybody totally used to constant all-day surveillance, whether you're at home or outdoors. In England, we are, I believe, one of the most surveilled countries in the world in terms of CCTV in public places. Then, of course, like sitting where I am now, I've got my webcam in front of me. I have my laptop with a camera on it. Every single phone has a camera pointed at your face and is recording you all the time. I have a works laptop for my day job with a camera in it, of course, a work phone with a camera in it, and it goes on and on and on. So the surveillance is already there. Now it's a case of getting that everywhere. So I agree with you on that point, that it's a case of rolling it out into the places where they haven't quite brought it up to that level yet. In terms of like England specifically, I've been reading through this fantastic book on my channel, which is the Milner-Fabian Conspiracy. It's quite a hard book to get hold of. Jay Dyer has done a read through, and not a read through like word by word, but an analysis of it. This book's really incredible. It follows on from the Fabian Freeway and Tragedy and Hope. And he says that in the introduction. He says, those two books were published in 1966. He says, and nothing much has been done since then. So I'm going to bring it up to the present day. And this was published in 2012. And he's a Romanian author, Juan Ratiu. And he does such a masterful job of tying in everything that we've been talking about. But what he talks about is specifically, and I haven't finished the book yet. I've got 2 chapters left, and they are, the next chapter is immigration. The next chapter is multiculturalism, and the one after that is Islamization. And so what is going on now is exactly that. It's a case of open borders, exporting lots of people in from various places, mixing together, and then stoking the tensions. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of and hearing a lot about is this kind of, I don't want to fall into this like, oh, white people are under attack. And because immediately people are conditioned to think you're a racist if you just try and say anything. But it's mainstream news that, for example, the city of Birmingham here in the UK is now, white people are now a minority. in that city. And there's whole areas, towns, places around where I grew up that have completely changed. And how would you feel if you were a native to a place, and by the time you were an adult, you are surrounded by people of a completely different cultural identity, different religion, different cuisine, different language, different way of dressing, different way of doing business, different way of treating their, different way of dealing with gender roles. It's pretty alarming. And what you got to think about is what is under attack and what's being lost. And I think there is a very good case to say that Christianity and the values that come with that kind of worldview are really on the decline, and it's deliberate, because I've got a introduction to another live stream which will be going out later this week, and the introduction is to juxtapose two stories. One is a video of a Muslim man praying in a very busy shopping center in the city where I live. It's a massive shopping center. It's a crazy mall type thing, and he's just on the floor doing his thing on his prayer mat, people walking up and down, in the middle of a shopping center in England, versus another story of people who are getting arrested for praying silently on the street outside abortion centers. And I'm like, how can you juxtapose these two things, right? You got to look at this and see, why is one being treated this way and the other one's absolutely fine to get on with their silent prayer in a public place, so it's seeing these kind of patterns and comparing them and noticing that there is a real discrepancy in the way certain groups, certain religions, certain skin colors are being treated and dealt with based on their behaviors. And I think there's something to be said for Christianity and the Christian worldview being severely under attack, and people are being trained to ridicule it. I see it in media all the time. The priests are always creepy, psychopathic, murderous, petty, morons, and that pretty much happens in every case. I see any TV show or film with a priest character in it. So, yeah, I don't know if I answered your question. I went off on a bit of a tangent there, but I think in terms of what's happening here, there's an importation of a totally different culture. And it seems to be set to either replace the native culture, or for there to be setting the stage or the scene for there to be some sort of religiously motivated or racially motivated conflict of some description. And that almost kicked off last year when we had some riots after some children were stabbed. And then there was a bunch of riots in a bunch of cities around here, and the leftists showed up to counter-protest the anti-immigration protesters. But then there was a lot of spin and strange things were going on then. So I thought that might be the spark that kicked it all off, but it didn't. So I think there's still a lot of tinder lying around, and there's still a lot of tension that needs to be released somehow. And so I kind of feel like that might be the next thing. And then, of course, that leads into, well, we need digital ID, and we need further controls over what can and can't be done, further restrictions on free speech, and that's how we're going to get all this under control, right? So it's classic problem, reaction, solution.
Yeah, as to the migration, I always go back to Peter Sutherland, Bilderberg, UN. He gave type in Peter Sutherland, BBC, an article comes up, a BBC article where he's openly saying, yeah, we need to bring in a flood of migrants to mix up the populations in Europe. And I think it's, as you said, part of it is just to have the plebes busy with each other, bring in the migrants and have the plebes going at each other, so they don't look up above, in countries like Mexico where it's more, the same culture and ethnicity. Okay, we're doing this morning's news where I am in Mexico. Hey guys, come down for some coffee and some lamb chops. Yeah, you're going to be the lamb. There's the story was 24 chopped up bodies found in the suburbs of my city. Authorities used drones with thermal imaging and found out mass graves of 24 chopped up bodies. So come down for some coffee. If anyone passing through town with me, have some coffee and lamb chops. Except you might end up being chopped up. No, it's not that. I mean, it is that bad, but it's not. It's hard to explain the paradox of Mexico. But so the plebes with the migration, they're fighting with each other. And then you've got, I think for economic reasons, you're bringing in cheaper labor. So the oligarchs get richer, the middle class gets poorer, and the migrants are happy with what they get because it's better than where they came from. And then also, what else was I going to say? And it's part of I think their occult ideology, the Tower of Babel, right? Again, Nimrod create this utopian sort of one world satanic government that they're going for. And it's just a mix of everyone. And, again, there's nuance here. I believe there's one human race. I don't believe intermarriage is a bad thing. I'm intermarried, with a brown Mexican, so you can't call me, the military intelligence listening to this who've tried to paint me as a white supremacist pro-Nazi, they can't because I'm a Mexican. So sorry, I got my get out of jail card there. I'm ranting here, but I did want to bring up our pastor this week spoke on preaching on Revelation, and just to add to the scale of what you're talking about, how crazy we're going. The latest statistic I think was 73 million premeditated abortions globally per year. Wow. So again, when we look at human history, it's like 70 million children being murdered deliberately. I mean, that's, if you look at all of history, that is really, next level. We're in, I think, uncharted territory here. But, anything else we haven't covered? Any other, you already gave some solutions on what to do. Go analog, unplug, read books, take a break from the news cycle, get community. Anything else?
Work on being the best version of you that you can be. Not to the point where you burn out and exhaust yourself, but it's really all about the individual stepping up. And we all know that the things we do that we shouldn't do, the bad habits, the silly behaviors, the foibles, the sins, if you want to use the biblical word, the way that we miss the mark, we all have an immense amount of potential, and time is ticking. And with each rotation of the clock, you lose some time to fulfill that potential. So I think it's a really good time to realize the systems are not going to be there to rely on. So you got to be self-reliant as best you can, and reliant upon other people, and have people rely on you. And so ironing out your bad habits, looking at ways that you can be healthier, that you can be more emotionally robust for whatever comes, being good at building relationships, being the reliable person in the family or on the street or in the neighborhood or in the business where you work or something like that. It's really important, I think, to take steps to live up to your potential and take it seriously. Because there's so many ways to kill time and waste time. But I always think of time, you can't really kill it or waste it, and you don't really spend it. I always think of time like you invest it. And no matter what you do with it, you're going to get some kind of return. And so I think looking at it through that lens, recognizing that time is limited, but then trying to shift in a more positive, wholesome, useful way of spending it, of investing it, so that the returns you get are good long-term situations for you and your loved ones and your family. I think that's a good message to put out there and encourage people to do. And stock up on books. I think with the way censorship's going, the memory holding that we've seen over the last 5 years, it's only going to get worse. Information is going to be harder to access. So anything that you think is important and valuable and relevant and other people need to know about, whether it's practical things like gardening or any kind of skill, first aid, woodwork, or if it's something that explains how we got into this situation. Because, as the situation unfolds, more and more people will be like, whoa, what's going on? And how did this happen? How did we get here? And we're going to be there going like, well, they wrote down in this book 100 years ago that they were going to do it. And we've been trying to tell you, I've been live streaming twice a week trying to get the message out. But to have a book to point to that you can lend people to help them understand how things got there can be very a source of comfort for people. I find it, learning about these things, as scary and creepy and weird and overwhelming and hopeless as it can seem, I still find a sense of peace from learning about and knowing these things, because now I have a narrative that makes sense. And it's good to be able to not be in total confusion and be taken off guard by not being able to explain or understand anything that's going on around you. So buy lots of books and store them and read them, save them for a rainy day, and board games as well, and candles, so that when the electricity goes out because you said the wrong thing on Facebook, you can still have a nice game of Catan or something. That's a good place to start if you want to start with your board games. Get Catan. That's a safe one. It's better than Monopoly.
Yeah, I love Catan. I left when we escaped Kazakhstan. I left it with some of my friends there. One of my favorite books, as you mentioned, books that talk about the future, a little under 2,000 years ago. The Holy Bible, the basic instructions before leaving Earth, talked a lot of prophecies that have come true. And you mentioned Time. Great song by Tom Waits, and Hootie and the Blowfish. They do a good. I like their song on time as well. But one last question for you. You're very well read and able to articulate and summarize a lot of your reading of the globalist material. I like to learn from others and take notes and incorporate best practices. Just if you could tell us anything about sort of your process. I mean, you got to invest, you got to buy a lot of books. That doesn't come cheap. And just sort of your process on maybe there's a tool that you use on, reading and then trying to keep that information in your head, because sometimes it's difficult. You read, then you forget a lot. You create notes, and sort of just your process of being able to learn, keep that knowledge, and then when you need to, explaining it to others.
Yeah, great. So on the topic of buying books, yes, they can be expensive, but I think it's an investment, because not a lot of people, because a lot of these books are rare, hard to find, and especially the older ones. And you can find pretty cheap for now. Quite a lot of these, you can get them pretty cheap. And I think the price is going to go up, the value is going to go up as we head more into a sort of technocratic system where more information is mediated by algorithms and artificial intelligence programs. The price is going to go up. Like that one I just showed, the Milner-Fabian conspiracy. I got it for around 30 or 40 pounds. And now it sells for up to $400 because there's not that many copies of it about, and people are buying those copies, right? The cheapest copy I found online the other day was $90. That's just one example of a fairly recent book. I have older ones. So you can see it as an investment, and that helps you justify the expense. So that's one thing. On the topic of my process, I listen to well-read people. So Richard Grove, Jay Dyer, and others who talk about the books that they're getting their information from. Alan Watt, again, another great example, talks a lot about the books. So listen to people who are well read and tell you what they have read and where they got their information. That helps. And then when you hear these books, what I do is I'll tend to add them to my Amazon basket and just leave them in there. And then every day have a look, and it'll tell you if the price has increased or decreased. And then you can just track it, and you can, sometimes it'll just drop suddenly for whatever reason, and you can grab it when it's nice and cheap. I just got a book on injections. I won't use the V word, but injections and crime statistics. And when I first saw this book, and I think it was published in the early 90s. So it's not an old book, but it's rare. And when I first saw it, there was one copy of it listed for £137. And then the other day, for some reason, it had dropped to 50. And a viewer had made a donation of exactly that much. And I was like, right, I'm just going to get it because I can't find any other copies available. And this is a little window, and it's a lot of money for a book, but I now have a copy of that, and I can read it and explain it to other people. And, I've got a book cam that I use in my live streams, so I can show people the words on the page. They know I'm not just making it up. So that's one tip, to keep an eye on the prices in Amazon, fill your basket, and then get them when they're cheap if you can. In terms of learning the information, I don't have a really good way of memorizing it. People probably notice that I don't have the amazing sort of autistic recall of names and dates and places, and this happened, then that happened, and the chronology and everything. I tend to describe things in more of a higher level, standing further back. This is what I think is happening, way of talking about things. So it depends what your purposes are. I think if you want to get that granular, nuanced informative ability to explain it with the names and the dates, then you might want to use some sort of mapping software like Richard Grove uses, like the brain model. And there's other things out there. there's a really good video as well, which talks about memorizing all the information in a book, just using post-it notes and index cards, right? So you capture the main ideas on these index cards, then you put them in order and you review those index cards, and then you can commit the flow of the argument or the narrative of the book or the explanations in the book by reviewing these index cards. So that's a good thing as well. I really like underlining. I like adding these little tabs. I'll give you an example. These little tabs to the important pages, so you can find good quotes quickly to go back. And then doing the other thing I would recommend as well is making a podcast or doing live streams or making your own content. Read a chapter, close the book, and then make a short video explaining what you just read. And you don't have to share it publicly. You don't have to put it out there, but you can watch it back and you can go, oh, I really didn't explain that very well. Let me try again. But I think having some sort of output that you can then feed back in and reflect on. So I'll listen to some of my interviews. I'll probably listen to this interview back, and then I'll cringe at myself for stumbling over certain words or getting things wrong or not explaining things well. But recording yourself and feeding it back in is a great way to improve. And repeating that process. So that's a good way to get. And then the more you explain and talk about things, the easier it is to recall the relevant points in the moment when you're having conversations with other people. So that's another thing you can do. And read a lot. That's the other thing. Make time for reading. It's more than just getting the information, right? It's I think of it like it's a gym for your mind. When you're on a screen, you're passive. You're docile, you are downloading someone else's information that they've written, they've scripted, they've shaped, and they probably don't have your best interest at heart. When you are reading, you're activated, you are seeking the information, letting curiosity guide you, you're looking for what stands out to you, and don't be afraid to pick out the things that resonate and stand out to you. Other people might say you missed a point or that's not the important bit. It doesn't matter. It's a personalized journey for you to go on. So make time to read, underline the stuff that stands out to you, and then find ways to communicate that to other people. And then if you're at that level and you're doing that, then I recommend getting the book, How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler, which tells you the 4 different levels of reading, culminating with level 4, which is syntopical reading, which is all about reading multiple books around a single topic. But that is a really well-written book that breaks down the process of reading and how to get better at it. And it's a fantastic resource. And I'm nowhere near level 4 yet, but I'm somewhere around level 2. But I would check that book out as well.
I see you've got behind you a copy of Jacob Nordengard's Global Coup d'etat. I had him on the podcast a couple of years back, and he's coming back in February to talk about his Rockefeller book. Some of the cool things about being a podcaster is I get books. He sent me the PDF for free. Awesome. Robert Kaplan, the Penguin Random House, sent me the physical advance of that book ahead of time. John Perkins' edition of latest of Confessions, I got that sent as well. He was on the podcast, so that's kind of cool. I was going to purchase the physical copy, nevertheless. I just bought Temple of Solomon from Jacob. It's on the way. Hopefully it gets to me in Mexico, because sometimes the postal service in Mexico is a black hole and stuff disappears. But I was looking at Global Coup d'etat and Rockefeller, the physical version on Amazon, and for some reason it's too costly, prohibitive for me to buy it right now. The shipping is almost the same price as the book, so it's like 50 plus for the book, and I'm like, I'm going to wait for that. But my one of my other points was forcing to have a deadline. So now that I have Jacob booked, I have to go read Rockefeller, his book on Rockefeller before we connect, do the podcast, and I also listen to myself when I give an interview, but for my editing purposes, I have to listen on 2x or 2x plus speed, again to this, and I also you learn by listening to yourself. Oh, I have this tick, or I could have done this better, and just kind of taking notes and making sure things. Sometimes when I thought I did a bad job, it turned out actually pretty good, and also highlighting. My favorite thing is highlighting. I don't like going crazy. It's too cumbersome for me. Taking notes or journaling is just like, I'm going to read the thing, I highlight it for reference, so if I ever have to go back, I've got the core juicy bits are highlighted, so I don't have to like go through the book and like here's the key stuff, and PDFs as well. I think I've got a copy of that book, the Milner book, in PDF, and I just bought extra external storage. So that going forward, I think what you mentioned, hard drives might fail, you might get hacked if you got multiple locations, physical locations of external data storage. That is super helpful. So just any thought on having some of these books in PDF? There are books that I'll tend, because I feel like we don't live forever. We're going to die. Everything's going to pass. So I don't think even having physical books, I'm going to die someday, not very long in the future. Because, even for me, a few decades in the future is like nothing, and there are some books I may want for a reason to have in physical, and then the others, maybe they're not as important and they're cheaper in Kindle. And I'll just buy them $10, read them, and I've got them in my head. Maybe Amazon will disappear at some point. I think there are ways, maybe still, I'm not sure, to break the DRM on Amazon and get that book, put it on the external storage. Just any thoughts on having the books in digital format?
Yeah, do it. Grab them. I've heard that a good thing to do is to unplug your hard drive. So, upload the data to it and then unplug it, and just leave some storage, not all of it, but some storage unplugged and switched off, because if there is some sort of attack, then it's safer that way. So I would definitely, because they don't take up much space, and having the digital copies is better than none. I don't know how advanced censorship is, whether they can get in and change things when it's on your, I guess they probably could. To my mind, having the physical copy here in my room with me is just that extra level of censorship proof. But go for the electronic copies. I think that's a definite worthwhile next best option, for sure. And there's places where you can get most things for free. I'm not going to say them, but you can hunt around and ask friends, and you'll probably find them, particularly in the freedom and truth community and groups. They'll throw those links to you. And in fact, that reminds me that Telegram was recently purged of links to two of the famous ones, which is important to bear in mind and to be aware of. That Telegram's cracking down. It's not the platform it once was, and probably to expect more of that. Get a printer. I don't know if you could get where you are or your audience, but you could get like an old office printer or something that still has some time left in it. And
I would recommend, while I was still employed by TNT Radio and I had some extra spending cash, I bit the bullet on a laser printer. I would only buy a laser printer at this point, having dealt with those inkjet printers. They always. How
much was that?
No, it was, and Brother is the best brand for my, and it was between $500 and $1,000.
Okay.
But you use it for homeschooling, for a lot, having multiple citizenships, having to do a lot of government stuff and paperwork. And this thing's going to last a long time. You don't have to change the ink because it's laser and it's color as well. So it's an investment, but I've been using it for a year now, I think. And, it just works flawlessly. And so forget the inkjet, having a laser, as you say, and you can print, if you got a PDF in color you want to print out, you can do it, and you don't have to. I bought a giant box of, I think, Office Depot, Office Max, the papers. I got a giant box of white paper for printing, and so, yeah.
Great tip, and I think a very worthwhile investment for for those who can afford it and are worried about censorship and having good information available in the case of some sort of internet lockout or blackout or turn off or whatever. Then that sounds good. I might start saving up now.
Yeah, I highly recommend. Like, this is one thing I learned first, as you said earlier, having hard assets. So getting rid of fiat, buying whatever you need, precious metals, a car, computers. I got my Rode mic. I bought external. I bought the thermal Brother printer for when it's time to do the dissident propaganda, White Rose. Remember during it popped up on Telegram during COVID.
Yeah, so I remember. Yeah,
I always keep one handy here. This is in Spanish. So I invested in the Brother printer. You can't read it.
Oh, nice.
There we go. And again, the laser printer and so forth. So All right. I think we did 2 hours, Nick. Great. I'm just curious again for listeners, leave your comments wherever you're watching or listening to this, Rumble, Odyssey, X, Substack, leave your comments. It was 2 hours too long, or is it fine? I listen to everything on 2x. So if I listen to something that's 2 hours, I do it in 1 hour. All of your links are in the description, but again, tell us your projects that are ongoing or in the pipe, best places to find you, listen to you, support you, services, all that, memberships.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So the best place to go is allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews. That's got everything on it, including my email address if you want to get in touch. The places where I broadcast: YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. I live stream there twice a week. We have a really good group of people who show up, and they help me by spell checking things and helping me with pronunciation of strange names. And filling out some of the contextual questions that come up as I'm reading books. So it's really a group effort. It's not really about, Nick. It's about the library of books and going on this learning journey together. And so if that sounds interesting, then join me on a live stream. It'd be good to have anybody come along. All my replays for the previous books that I've read through, and there's 10 of them now, I've read through in their entirety. They're all under the playlists tab on my channels. Rumble and Odyssey doesn't have as many because I only started broadcasting there sort of part way through, but they have 3 full books on, as well as the new one, Milner Fabian Conspiracy, which will be finished in the next week or so. And then I have a new project as well that I started and I launched in we're still in January, at the start of this month, 2025, which is an online community called Devised. And this is for screen addicts and people who have a tech addiction and might be struggling with dealing with that. The community is there to offer support and help understand why it is that we're so fascinated with these devices, understanding the damage they're doing, and to move forward with trying to find some solutions. And I think addiction is it's a topic that's incredibly important. It's close to my heart. I've done a fair bit of reading and research around it to deal with my own bad habits over the years, and it's something that I feel I can offer a lot of guidance and help for people who are interested in that. So that community, we meet twice a week, casual place to get to know the people, discuss technology, its impact on our lives, and then we also do we have a book club there as well, where we're currently reading through the 4 arguments against television book that I mentioned earlier in the stream tonight. But the links for that and everything else that I have and do is allmylinks.com/Hayes Reviews.
All right, yeah, that's in the description. And again, I always ask listeners, it's a simple thing, free thing you can do is just, if you've got a Rumble account, a YouTube account, Odyssey, Telegram, X, Instagram, just go to Hayes Reviews and just subscribe simply to his channel. And something you mentioned, I got a few emails recently, and I got kind of miffed because one of my listeners was insinuating something nefarious about myself, simply, because I talk about decentralized, some of my sponsors are tech stuff, Above Phone and Escape the Technocracy, that I'm not on PeerTube or Mastodon. And an acquaintance of mine from Russia, just a guy, I'm still in contact with him. Shout out to him. He sold me some souvenirs, and he's conspiracy minded. And he asked me, why am I not on, I should get on RussiaTube, our YouTube. And it's like, and for the people insinuating, why are you not on this platform or that? It's like, I'm literally one guy barely surviving doing what I'm doing. And I even post to more places than others typically do. Like, we're on 7 video platforms. The Geopolitics and Empires, X, Substack, Pentagon Tube, Odyssey, Brighteon, BitChute, Rockfin, I think, Telegram, and then the audio is in the audio ecosystem. Could you imagine me first backloading the archive of 500 plus videos on our YouTube, and then PeerTube, and you're not getting paid for that. You're not going to get many views. So I'm basically spending like weeks for free while so, and then Mastodon, and then there's Noster, and then I'm on MeWe and Gab, and Minds is dead. I was on Float. Float died. It's kind of like there's only enough bandwidth that we have as people. You're spread thin. So it's not like I won't do it. It's just like, guys, I can't. I'm literally up to here, and I didn't even have interviews planned. This week we got I'm on tomorrow morning. I'm being interviewed, and I got Charles Hugh Smith. Jack Cruz was on Danny Jones. I scheduled within this week. And so it's just kind of like, yeah, there's only so much. There's this song from Tom Morello, One Man Revolution. This is a skeleton crew. It's a one man revolution. So there's only so much I can physically, humanly do. So anyways, Nick, I hope Hayes reviews goes a long way. And thanks for being on Geopolitics and Empire.
Thank you for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I really enjoy the work you do. And I'm looking forward to future episodes.